I ran for on the Green Party for both of those offices because it gave me an opportunity to talk about the issue that I feel most passionate about, and that is criminal justice. And the Green Party listened to us and helped, we were able to help shape, to some extent, the platform. So I'm very appreciative to Mark, who really got me into this, but also the Green Party, who was willing to listen to us. And now we're in a situation where a lot of people listen to us who would not listen before because of all the things that we've been able to do. I just want to talk a little bit about the criminal justice issues that the community has become involved in. We've had a number of community discussions about these issues, and we've been able to educate a lot of people about some of these important issues and gotten them involved actively in trying to lobby or demonstrate against them. So I'm just going to mention the ones that we feel very strongly about, and it's my hope that many of you will embrace these issues and help us make some changes that we think are necessary. As you probably know, the governor of the state of New York sent out his criminal justice program proposals, which were part of the budget. And he focused on basically 4 major issues. One was, of course, bail and pretrial detention. And the idea, of course, was to change that and to get rid of cash bail, to deal with the issue of pretrial detention. So many of the people in our community find themselves in jail and cannot get out simply because they cannot afford bail. And that affects so many people in our community that this is identified as the major issue that we should work on this past 5 months, whatever it is. So we've been doing that. And as I said, we did a number of discussions in the community. We were able to talk to people who are affected by this whole situation. As you probably know, there's about 20,000 people who are in jail in New York State on any one day. And most of them are there simply because they cannot afford bail. Sometimes it's $1,500, sometimes it's as low as $500. And one of the things that people don't understand is it's not just staying in jail. The impact, the collateral damage is extensive. When you're in jail, I don't care if it's 3 days, 2 days, you are subject to losing your job, and many of our people do lose their jobs if they don't show up for work the next day and they're in jail. It affects families in numerous ways, especially women, which no one has paid attention to because they're least likely to have the kind of money to do that. They oftentimes are stay home. They have children, it affects children. I mean, there's a host of issues that are there that we have not talked much about. So we embrace that as a major issue. And we started working with a number of organizations throughout the state, including CATAL. I don't know if any of you are familiar with CATAL, which is a relatively new organization, and they focus on health, equity, and justice. Also, the New York Civil Liberties Union has been involved with this as well. But there are many, many other organizations that took on this issue as a major one because it really does have a horrible effect. The governor also talked about issues around discovery and speedy trial, which are basically a lot of legal jargon that we didn't really go into, but the whole idea is that we need to change how information is given to defense attorneys and also to procedures that keep people in jail for long periods of time, and sometimes it leads to their deterioration mentally. And we've seen that in a broader case where it also led to death. So those are important issues, but not much has been done, I think, to change it. He also proposed some changes in civil forfeiture, which we're having a discussion about in the community right now, because what's been happening is the government's been able to take people's property without due process. It simply means that someone thinks that you've used whatever resources or drug involvement, it gets taken away. And this is very damaging to people. And then he did propose some re-entry suggestions which deal with parole supervision, where people are charged fees for being on parole, which I always think is totally ridiculous. There are also some issues that we will probably be involved in later, and particularly parole revocation. Many of the people in our community who are on parole find themselves going back to prison simply because they might violate some technical condition of their parole, like not being able to go to a planned or scheduled meeting or whatever, or having travel problems. All those kinds of issues come into play. So we've been working on a number of those issues. Unfortunately, I don't think many of them are going anywhere. The one that probably did perhaps reach a lot of people, and we were able to make some changes in the legislation, was the bail and pretrial detention. So our hope is that of all of his proposals, at least the one on bail will actually be changed. So, aside from bail reform, which as I mentioned, we've been working on, the next major issue for us is one that has caused a lot of discussion in the community, and I'm really surprised that more groups have not embraced this, and that is the voting rights for persons who are incarcerated. As you know, the governor did sign an executive order not too long ago where he was willing to allow people on parole to vote, which was nice. However, we believe in universal suffrage, that in a democracy, everyone should have the right to vote. And a lot of people said, well, I can't agree with you because people who are incarcerated don't deserve the right to vote, which always stymies me. I can't imagine. So we've worked very hard on not only getting the right to vote for parolees, but also pushing that issue of universal suffrage, and particularly allowing people who are incarcerated to vote. They do in Maine, in Vermont, and the world hasn't come to an end in those states. So we've really been concerned about this because some of the people that we've worked with in the past, and I'm going to mention the League of Women Voters, which is, you know, a nice organization. However, they can't seem to embrace that idea of having persons who are incarcerated be allowed to vote. And I've tried to get them interested in it, but it goes nowhere. So it's a very hard issue to deal with because we're convinced that if you are incarcerated, you don't deserve the right to vote. But it has a serious impact on communities of color because of the disproportionate incarceration of our people. It affects the voting strength of communities of color very seriously. Not only not having the right to vote, but being confused about whether you do have it or not. People who get off parole don't believe that they can vote. And because the laws across the country are so crazy, you know, even people who are fairly aware of these laws still don't know that they have the right to vote. And recently, a woman in Texas who had been incarcerated was on parole. She voted, and she was given a 5-year sentence for voting. So this is the kind of thing that we deal with. And I was really sensitive to that issue because when I ran for office, being on the street and talking to people who had been incarcerated and they were off parole for a long period of time, they still didn't believe they had the right to vote. Even the Board of Elections in Albany County, they were confused. They didn't believe that people who were not on parole had the right to vote. I've come in contact with judges and legislators, and they do not know the law. So if you, in this state, if you are incarcerated for a felony conviction, you cannot vote, and right now, until this executive order goes into effect, you cannot vote while you're on parole. But there are loads of people inside of our jails, that's the other thing that we focus on, who can vote. Everybody in the jail can vote. So we've been doing a lot of work trying to educate administrators and officials and the people who are inside of our jails to the fact that they can vote. We've been going in and doing some education, giving information out, and trying to get the jails to allow us to go in and actually help people register to vote. They're not open to that usually. But it's a big issue, and I think we really need to focus more attention on that there are some people that we need to be working with, and they are in jail. The other issue that we spent a lot of time on is because we're so concerned about mass incarceration and racial disparity, we are trying to promote diversion programs throughout the state. We do have one in Albany, and there are a number of other communities that are now thinking about doing the same thing that we've done in Albany, and the Center for Law and Justice led the way to developing the LEAD program, which is a law enforcement assisted diversion program. We have been able to divert close to 150 people from being arrested and put in jail over the past 2 years, and the program is continuing to grow, and as I said, more communities are becoming interested in it as well. It allows people who come in contact with the police and are threatened with arrest to actually be put into case management programs and treatment programs instead of, I only got 2 minutes, I better hurry up. instead of jail. So that's a very important program, and we would like support on that as well. The opioid crisis, as you probably heard, there is an opioid crisis. We've been concerned about that mainly because it's been identified as a white issue. And we are trying to focus attention on all the communities that have this problem, and to develop treatment and educational programs that involve them, which has not really happened. So there are a number of issues that we've been working with on the opioid crisis, but I won't go into them. My 2 minutes left. The other important issue that we've been working on for about 5 years now is to develop a Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission that would look at the harm and the damage that our policies in this state regarding drugs and criminalization have caused in our community. We need an opportunity to listen to people who have been affected by the criminal justice system and incarceration and what that really does to the fabric of your society. And we did manage to collect about 10,000 signatures, and we submitted it to the governor. I don't think he knew we were there, but we tried. And so we're still working on it, and we're trying to get other jurisdictions to pass resolutions supporting the effort to have a Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission that will look at that harm. And part of our program has been, that we've been involved with, is what we call reparative justice, trying to make sure, especially like the drug issue that I just mentioned, to recognize that we still have people inside of our prisons who have been harmed by these drug laws, and no one's paying attention to them. So that's what we're trying to do, and I hope we will be working on some of these issues together.